I'll start with introductions. So, welcome to Christine Durbin. Chris Durbin is a freelance translator, French to English, based in Paris, where she specializes in publication-level texts for demanding clients, the shareholders, customers, and partners of a range of French corporations and institutions. Chris is also a member of the American Translators Association and the Société Française des Traducteurs. She's also a fellow of the Institute of Translation and Interpreting and is currently special advisor to the European Commission's Optimal Program. As a past president of the SFT, the Société Française des Traducteurs, she was also awarded the ATA's Gold Medal, which is quite an accomplishment. Chris has also written a client education column called The Onion Skin that ran for years in the ITI Bulletin and the ATA Chronicle. She's the co-author of the Fire Ant and Worker Bee Advice column in the Translation Journal. And she's also published a compilation of the Fire Ant Worker Bee columns in a book called Prosperous Translator. We're very happy that Chris has agreed to talk to us today about what it's like to be a freelance translator in the financial area of specialization. And Anita will kick off with some questions.
Okay, well, I guess the first question is just to get a sense of your work. What does it entail?
My work entails translating, but actually it also it's a bit broader than that. I read papers, I read the newspapers, and I listen to the news. I have to keep my eyes out for information that's of interest to my clients and in the deals that they're doing and work that they're doing. I also keep an eye out for things that are likely to come up in the text that I get. What I do, in fact, is translate text from French to English for French companies. A lot of them are listed on the stock exchange, but there are also some smaller ones that aren't. I work for market authorities, and I work for some regional development agencies. In each case, what I do, the text that I do, involve really understanding the field that the texts are about, but there's almost always some sort of pitch to it. That is, the texts are selling something or trying to convince somebody of something. So it's not just knowing how the stock market operates, for example. It's also knowing what your particular client wants to do with their text and why it has to be very persuasive to get somebody on board for some project or other. Sometimes the texts I do are going to be backgrounders for executives who will be holding press conferences, and so they have to be able to sound confident and have the arguments they need to make their case in front of people. That's what I do in terms of translation. But it also goes beyond just working with text. I mentioned reading the press and so on. I also have to read a lot about the areas that I work in, so that I know almost as much sometimes as my clients do on those specific areas. Because otherwise, my text would not ring true. It wouldn't work properly. And to get that kind of information, I'm in my office, as you can see here, work, but I also go out to client events. And these are industry events, not translation industry events, but events that people in the fields I work for go to find out information they need. I've made a little list here just so I can tell you some recent things I've done. In the rail industry, I work financial communications, business communications, but for the rail industry. And a while back, I went to a day-long event on electrifying tracks for France's high-speed trains. Now, I don't deal with the electrification part, but I use pieces of what's said there to make the arguments, make the pitch of transport companies more convincing. And I have to understand how it works a bit. Also, one of my clients is in food industry, and they're interested in food safety and the type of claims that you can make about health claims for your food products that you can make in Europe with a European directive, European Food Safety Agency. And so next week I'll be going to a full day event for food safety specialists, just to see how they talk and to see the kind of arguments that they are allowed to use, so that I can recycle those arguments in text I translate. And then last thing is, in January, I just signed up for a day-long event on crisis management, because some of the translations that I do are for clients who are in a crisis situation, and it's interesting for me to see how their internal communications people deal with crisis, so that I can do the same thing, or at least know what kind of information, what kind of documents to do. That was, that's a broad sort of overview of what I do, but that gives you an idea.
Well, it sounds like lots and lots of different areas. So what is the pace of your work like?
That kind of depends. Yeah, it depends. It can be very intense, which actually does not bother me that much because I kind of like the adrenaline flow when you're working on something, something that's intense. I would say that in the past few years, things have eased up a little bit. That is, it's not that I'm working from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, like go, 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 go. Now I'm working very intensely at certain times, and then other times I just have a nice pace of work. That is, I always have work to do. I hardly ever have a day off. But I can organize my time in blocks of time so that I can focus on just reading the press for a while or whatever. I actually wrote out some figures too because I think on an annual basis, my busiest time of year is probably the spring, from say February through May. That's when companies are producing their annual reports for shareholders, and those are big documents pretty much. I do maybe 7 or 8 a year, and so my time is booked from February through to May. Pretty much every week is booked, and then you have to juggle if the people are late on this and that. You juggle, but that's a very busy time of year. But aside from that, there are reporting requirements every quarter for listed companies. So every quarter I have probably a week that's pretty intense with earnings, companies publishing earnings and commenting on it and so on and so forth. And then I have other just purely seasonal things. I was joking with a friend last week. I translated 3 Christmas cards. And French companies right now, well, in France, of course, it's not a Christmas card, it's a New Year's card. You would never celebrate, send out a Christmas card. So it's a New Year's card. And they used to be very simple, like season's greetings or all the best for the New Year or something. And nowadays, they tend to be very elaborate. They're complex. There are animated bits to them, and there's a little storyline. So you have to do the translation into English. You have to watch the animation. You have to make sure that the words you select go with the picture, go with the animation. Sometimes you only have a certain amount of space on the screen for the electronic Christmas card. What else? Sometimes there are company buzzwords that you want to recycle in. And so they're really actually quite fun. And I keep thinking I should organize a workshop on translating Christmas cards, because I'm sure that in translating a Christmas card, you cover everything, all the basic translation issues that you people tackle in classes and stuff.
Really interesting. Fascinating. That would be fun. I think it's interesting. You've talked a lot about the input you need in order to translate well of all of the reading that you do and attending all these events. Let's talk about a little bit more about output. What kind of output is expected of you?
Well, that depends too. It depends on what's going on in the news and on the jobs that I accept. Because I'm the one who says yes or no to the job. So if I say, if I'm tired of it, if I've been working too much, I can sort of ratchet down a little bit. When I'm intense, when I'm on some specific issue for a client, I can be required to produce up to 600 or 700 words an hour, sometimes more. And when I look at that, I think, my gosh, how actually did I do that? Well, I am also the world's fastest typist. And that helped, I think. Just to give you an example, in 2011, there was a question of Euronext, the New York Stock Exchange, Paris Stock Exchange, linking up with Deutsche Börse, the German exchange. That started the discussions and negotiations started in January in 2011, and it ultimately fell through in, December 2011. So it was an entire year. And I did a lot of work on that, on press articles, on arguments for this side and that side, and keeping everybody in the picture and so on. And that was an issue where by the month of June, I had done so much of it that I actually could produce 700 words an hour, which is, it's pretty fast. Just because I knew all the arguments. I knew what somebody was going to say, and so I could go really quick. But in a normal day, normally I like to track myself just to make sure I don't get bogged down too much or quote too low on projects. And I like to be able to do at least 250 words an hour. That would be my sort of average rate. But it depends, because if you have a particularly complex text, it can take you a lot longer than that. And the example I give occasionally is once I worked for 1.5 days on one word. And clearly there I was being paid per hour, not per word.
Right.
It's an interesting question.
I'm just curious, are you then, you're also your own copy editor and proofreader in that production?
I have an advisor, and I used to work with a fellow who sat back behind me here. He's retired now. And so I now work with an excellent reviser on the East Coast of the United States, Lillian Clementi. And so, depending on the type of text, but if it's publication level text, normally I'll do my draft work on it, and depending on the time zone difference and if the client needs it right away, or how we organize ourselves, Lillian will then get my text, go through it, and improve it, send it back. I'll look at it, talk to the client. Goes around a bit like that. But I definitely have, whenever possible, an outside person reading text. That's important. That's very important.
Okay, and with that incredible output that you have, do you use translation technology?
Well, I do use a computer.
Okay. Oh, you're not doing this by hand, huh? No shorthand.
No. But actually, I don't use translation memory myself, although Lillian does, and Lillian, I sort of outsource to some extent my use of translation technology, aside from basic software and basic computer. I use Mac instead. So I can, and Lillian will create by texts so that we can check terminological consistency and so on. She uses translation memory to some extent. I don't. And one of my points there is, and I know I've had discussions with a couple of people about this, a number of people about this actually. I'm skeptical about the usefulness of translation memory tools, and above all, machine translation. That doesn't really apply to what we do, but even translation memory, because I have seen translators who used to be good at translation in the field I work in, who got on board the translation memory technology train, and somehow lost their writing ability along the way. Now, it's not the fault of the translation memory tools at all, but I think it might have to do with the fact that they are taking on too much work. And there's always this idea that if someone said, "I have 13,000 words to be deliver it tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, at the end of the week," if you don't have technology tools, you will not say, "Yes, I'll do that," unless you're crazy, right? But something tells me that when people can run a text through their technology tools, something comes out. Like you have something to start out with. And then their idea, I think, is that they're going to post-edit that. They're going to fix that. They're going to look at it very carefully. And my experience is that lots of times, having run it through, they don't look at it carefully enough. And so you get texts that are produced with all of the technological enhancements that should make you go faster, but the text loses something in style. And I've actually seen translators in my field who used to be good and who are not now. And I say part of it's not the tools themselves, but it's that they're misusing them or they're getting greedy or something. So that's a problem. And I also think in a general way, the whole post-editing business is tricky, because I do think that your writing style is affected by the text that you read. And so if you read a lot of PowerPoint stuff, and knowing that you're going to have to fix it, I think ultimately your own writing style is affected, adversely contaminated. And that's not what you want. That pulls you out of the premium market and into the bulk market, which is not good.
So it's almost as if you lose your ear, in some sense, but you're thinking of music or something?
You lose your language instinct. Yeah, you lose your language instinct, I think. And I keep looking for people, official people or university people who will comment on that, and I haven't heard a lot of people say that. Rather, meetings I go to, occasional meetings I go to, it's always the marvels of technology. Okay, computers are good, I think. But it's discounting maybe the fact that there can be an adverse impact on what you do. But that assumes too that translators have an idea of what what the different market segments are out there, and that they actually are targeting one or the other.
Okay.
And for the market I'm interested in, you really have to be aware of how you write, be careful of how you write, and avoid creeping translation needs. that would push you off to one side, which is not.
That's really fascinating. Could you actually just talk a little bit about your personal background? How did you become a translator?
Well, I studied languages. I was good at languages. I traveled to. I studied languages for a year in college in Canada, and then I traveled to France and started studying here. I was studying languages without a real clear focus on it. I think the way lots of people do, and I know that at the time my university teachers here in France had no idea about what translators did. They taught us translation as a means of testing language acquisition. And I think that happens a lot in language departments. You do, in French it's thème et version. Right. The idea is that you by translating, you're showing that you've understood how this or that grammatical structure works. And of course, real translation, professional translation is not that. It doesn't correspond to that at all. So I note to self. Looking back, the course content and teachers were hopeless for the most part. On the other hand, I just did what they asked me to do. I didn't complain about it. Anyway, but they didn't have any idea of what the market required. And I can remember hearing some of them say some quite disparaging things about translation. One famous quote, and this was Danica Seleskovich, whom you may have heard of from ISI. I remember being at a conference, I wasn't at ISI myself, but I attended some language event where she spoke, and she actually said, "Oh, I'm happy to see that there's students in the room here, because it shows that you like the field and you're interested enough to come. Of course, you will never get rich doing this, and you're going to have to, really slog away. You'll never make any money being a translator, but it's nice that you're interested." And I was incensed, even at my young age, to hear her say that, because it seemed to me that she was setting it up. Not she's not an evil person, of course, but she was setting the students up to be noble losers, and that bothers me actually, because I think that if you are a good translator and if you're focused, and you enjoy your work and so on, you can earn a good living. You really can. So that was, that's just sort of a roundabout anecdote, but my experience of academics in France was they had no idea. Anyway, I was fortunate in that after a couple of years of study, I answered an ad in the paper because I needed to pay my rent, and I got a job in a bank, working in the research department of the bank, translating brokerage reports, which I knew nothing about. But it was good because it was a small department, and so I could talk to the office. I could talk to the financial analysts who wrote the reports, and I asked them what was what, and this was that, and I did a lot of reading and I took courses. At the time, I was studying. I took night classes. I was studying at night, and that was also very good because the students in the night classes tended to be older and a little bit more grounded than the undergraduates in the other classes, and so that was I learned a lot from them. That was actually pretty good. So I worked in a bank research department translating. I think I was pretty bad when I started, but I got better as I went along. And I worked there for maybe 7, 8, 9 years, something like that. Enough to learn a lot about how the French economy works and take night classes and so on and so forth. I also did, actually at one point I found translation was a little lonely. And so in the evening I did a teaching certificate course and taught part-time for a couple of years, and enjoyed the give and take with students. But then ultimately just went back to translation because I enjoyed that more. So that's where it came from. Anyway, I've been freelance now. I worked part-time at the bank for a while, then full-time, then part-time, and developed my freelance business on the side, and now I work entirely freelance.
Okay, and you mentioned the market. How do you position yourself within the market as a professional freelance translator? Right.
I describe myself as working in financial communication, financial translation, business translation, but with regard to the market itself, I would say very definitely focused on being at the premium end of the market, and as opposed to the bulk end. And when you get into words like premium and bulk, and it sure sounds like you'd much prefer to be premium bulk, right? Okay.
Can you define them?
The difference, I would make premium too. Sorry?
Oh yeah, just to define them for us.
Well, I said the difference. Yeah. Well, the definition of difference I would give is that in premium translation, the texts that you do are really important for your authors. Those are my clients. Like the texts are really, really important, and so they require familiarity with topics being discussed, and you have to be able to write well and make your case for them. Oftentimes there's a big risk involved for the clients, right? They need to have a good translation because otherwise something bad will happen. They will lose money, or their image will get wrecked or something. So they take this type of text very, very seriously. And because they take the text seriously, they take me seriously. I was at the ATA conference, I think I was mentioning that for me, what you want when you're looking for clients are good clients as opposed to bad clients, right? And good clients, in my experience, are very passionate about what they do. They're really excited about it. And so part of my job then is to get equally excited about it. And maybe it's a sign of how superficial I am, but I managed to get quite excited about most of the text that I translate. So that's number one for good clients, premium clients. Number two, they have to have budgets. If they don't have money, even if they're really nice, at some point, I would work for free for a good cause if they're very nice and so on. But I also want to make a living, and so I avoid clients that do not have budgets, or I terminate that kind of quickly. And there, an example for me would be tourism. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because all of us who have traveled, you always notice tourist brochures that are appalling, poorly translated. The city, welcome to our city, or here's the restaurant, here's the museum, and a lot of those texts are very, very poor indeed. When I was young, I actually did, seeing that they obviously had a crying need for good translations. I actually tried to contact a bunch of tourism entities to see about working for them, and realized very quickly that the reason their translations were bad was that they had no money, and so they were doing them themselves, or having the cousin do them, or the brother-in-law do them, or whatever. And so much as I could see they needed translation, and much as they would admit, yeah, they did need good translation, they didn't have any money. And so I sort of moved on from there. That's just an anecdote as well, but I think it's a thing worth thinking about. Because clients, if you're working on texts that are important, yeah, they can pay you for that. They can pay you for that.
That's interesting. Yeah, I definitely have noticed it and wanted to go in and save them myself, but I've actually, the last time I did that, I was rebuffed. It was at the Montaigne's house. I was rebuffed for my corrections on there. other English pamphlet.
Do you think that your specialization has changed over the years? And do you think that there are things that have remained constant?
Do you mean what I do with the specialization I'm in?
Yeah, the demands, have over the years, has technology come to play a bigger role in what you do, or have there been different demands placed on you owing to globalization or other market factors? Or have things in terms of what you need to do remained relatively constant?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? I think things have certainly speeded up massively. When I worked in my salaried job in the bank 30 years ago, I was given a text to translate. I worked on a manual typewriter. That was before computers. And I would prepare a draft. And I was a touch typist. Americans are touch typists. So I would prepare a draft, and my draft would be given to the financial analyst who'd written the broker's report, who would mark it up, and then a secretary would type up a manual copy of the report. These were like 2 or 3 or 10-page reports. Give it to me. I would check it, fix things, send it back, and she would retype it. Can you imagine that? This was brokerage advice, like buy Renault, sell Peugeot. It's unthinkable nowadays, where brokerage reports have to get out within the hour very often, or within the half day. Otherwise, the information is of no use to anybody. So certainly things have speeded up a lot. On the other hand, I no longer do that particular type of text because I did a lot of brokerage reports, and I learned a lot from doing that actually. But little by little, I started analyzing the market more and seeing which types of texts interested me more, and which texts were more fun for me a certain way. Also, which texts paid more. And again, the brokerage reports, what I noticed with the brokerage firms was that they had such volumes of work that past a certain number of words or number of pages per month, their monthly bills from me would get so high that they would go and hire an in-house person to do their work. And that was, just interesting to notice. And so I then started looking for areas in financial translation, which I already knew about at that point, where there really was going to be no price pressure. And that led me to just target the corporate suite, as it were, because I realized that all texts that revolve around the chief executive and the senior team they're not subject to the same budget constraints as anywhere else. It has to be good, full stop. It has to be good, and they'll invest the money they need to get it done well. And so that made that all much more attractive. But then as I say, it's also the adrenaline surge, and I think some translators complain about lack of respect and nobody takes us seriously. Quite frankly, if people are paying you a lot of money and you're doing a really good job, they do take you seriously, and that's gratifying. It's gratifying. Just this afternoon, I was working on a PowerPoint for somebody, and they called back 2 or 3 or 4 times, just wanting to make sure that the slide number 3 was right. Was that exactly what they wanted to say? And that sort of interaction with clients, I find very good. It's essential to make the text work. You have to know exactly what nuance they were shooting for to do your job properly. And I would not want to work in a translation environment where people shoot text at me out of the black hole in space, and I get it, and I have to type, and do it, and send it back to out into space without any interaction. That just wouldn't be of interest to me. It would be less intellectual.
It's very interesting. I just had a conversation with a startup translation company that was seeking translators across the globe to do work for them, and they wanted pretty much what you've just described. We will hook you up and throw text at you, and you send it back to us. And it's the polar opposite to what you're describing. In fact, I thought it was odd that they were describing themselves as a translation company, because it didn't seem to me that was really what they wanted to do. But yeah, there's a lot out there. I think they thought, you're in a restaurant and you can't make them understand that you want a cheeseburger, and so you call us and we'll connect you with somebody who can say cheeseburger for you. And it was a very odd way to present translation, and certainly very opposite to what you're saying about, we're in a profession, we need to command respect, and we do that by taking on jobs that are important for one, but also by understanding that what we do is important and conveying that to our clients. It's also a matter of client education, and it's a matter of being very astute about how you want to position yourself. It's obvious that you spent an awful lot of time looking at the market and deciding what you wanted to do and analyzing the texts that were more exciting for you to work on, and then deciding what kind of a translator you wanted to be. It takes a lot of time and investment in marketing yourself and in setting yourself up, positioning yourself in the market to take that sort of an approach. It's very astute. I think it's going to be helpful for the students.
Well, I think so, but okay. Well, one thing that I've noticed, and I say regularly in public because I'm that kind of person, is that when a translation intermediary comes to a translator and says, okay, we've got this job that you can do, and here you go. You have to deliver this or that day, and here the price is such and such. The price for France is such and such. Price for that. what the translator has to keep in mind is that there is no one price ever. When a translation intermediary says something like that, what they're saying is that is our price, right? And you can look at that and say, well, you know something? That's not my price. But you can only say that if you've got something to sell, really got something to sell, and somebody who knows that you're good at what you're doing. And that's where, like, my advice to students would be something like, realize that you're going to have to put in a lot of time to specialize. And it will be boring. Part of it will be boring. I mean, if you have the right attitude, even something that seems quite dry in some subject should not be a boring fact. You should be able to get excited about it one way or another. But there really is an ongoing investment in tracking your subjects and language as well. Actually, tracking developments in language as well. That you have to be ready to make, because what you want actually as a translator, since there are a gazillion people out there who speak languages, some of them quite fluently speak languages quite fluently, you have to have a differentiating factor. You have to make sure that you're not fungible, just like the big part of the big, great, teeming, unwashed masses out there. You have to have something that you do better than anybody else, and a couple of things if possible. And that could be, it could be your writing style. It can be the fact that you know everything there is to know about some obscure field where people need translations. It could be that you're particularly good at client interaction. And I think I'm good at that, actually, because there's a way to formulate questions to get information about the text that you give and translate. There's a way to formulate your question where you're not saying, by the way, your text is garbage, which could be sometimes the case, where you're saying, right, do you mean this or that? Oh, I see where you're going. How about if we say it this way? Okay, so you have to have a manner where you're not being a cowed slave who's going to deliver because you've been told to deliver, but where you're actually saying, right, we're working on this together here. And good clients like that. That's what they want. When they go to a translator who's a specialist, what they want is a translator who's not going to take any old thing and, give them back any old thing, but he's going to ask them questions and probably get them to improve the source text at the same time. That's what I mean.
Do you think it's important?
That's part of our added value.
Do you think it's important for translators to be involved with translation and interpreting bodies like the ATA and FEET and the SFT?
Yeah, right. Well, I think it's a fundamental thing, because when you start out in particular, some of your first jobs will come not from clients or from agencies, but from colleagues. And you get work from colleagues because they see you at professional meetings and they talk to you. You make sense, and you're not a ranter or raver or crazy person. There are some translators who have very poor social skills. I think those can work against you in many, many ways. But the fact that you go out not just to any old place, but to actual venues where there are professional translators is a very important thing. And I would make a big, I'm a member of ATA, ICI, and SFT. That's maybe overdoing it a little bit. But I would make a case for young translators joining their national professional body as a student member or something as soon as possible. Though national professional associations are not the same as online commercial platforms, where I fear lots of young translators, instead of doing the work you need to join a professional association, they migrate to discussion groups and platformy things like Prose and Translators Cafe. I'm not criticizing the conversations and chat, because that's kind of friendly, and the translator who lives in the cave on top of a mountain is not in good shape either. But I find that the professional skills on those commercial platforms are very hit and miss, very hit and miss. And if you're getting your work from those types of sources, it's not going to be the same as if you are in a professional association. I feel really quite strongly about that, because you should be in your national association. That's a sort of basic thing in a field as fragmented as translation.
Yeah, interesting. So this has been fascinating for us. I was wondering if you have any other advice that you would give to novice translators entering the freelance market. that we haven't already covered?
I was going to say, read my book. That was a joke.
Well, we actually have it in one of our classes, by the way. We have students reading your book. We have a class in editing for translation, and your book is one of our readings in there.
Is that right?
So.
Okay. Okay. I think you should have a mentor. You should find somebody whose translations you like and try to meet up with them or connect with them in some way or another, and kind of see it, and maybe through your professional association, but build ties to mentors. Be very careful about your internships, because those are what your future employers and clients are going to look at. It's the internships that will get you your foot in the door in the first place. I think you should have a game plan, like a business plan of some sort. Needn't be terribly formal, but you should set yourself goals for, say, every 6 months, and check back just to make sure that you're not going around in circles, that you actually are moving ahead in what you're trying to do. I've mentioned specialization. I think that's important. When you start out, you don't know what you're going to specialize in, but you should keep your eye out to identify areas that make a good match with you and your skills. I think too that it probably would be useful, and of course, the real world might slip in here, but you should pull together some funding so that right up front, so that you have a budget as you start out, so that you're not forced to accept any and all work that comes your way, so that you actually can make some choices. Because one thing for sure is that once you've started working at a low price, you have revealed your pain threshold, and it will be extremely hard to go above that with that particular client. So starting to work at low prices, and when you start out, by definition, the prices will be lower than as you get more experience. But below a certain level is just not an economic activity. And if there's no point in saying, "Oh, I love to translate, so I'll do this for free, or I'll do this for 2 cents a word." No, that's absurd. That's a waste of your time and the effort that you put into getting an education, I think. I think it's really worth getting some experience in-house. Presumably you'll have that through your internship, but even in a low-end agency, it's a good idea to do that, if only to see how you don't want to work in the future, but just to see how the process goes. That I think is a useful idea, rather than be out there on your own. Be prepared to log some time. I say have your business plan, like every 6 months, check back to make sure you're moving ahead a little bit. But keep in mind that it doesn't happen overnight. You have to work at it. You have to be available. Especially when you're starting out. And I think maybe, above all, note to self, you should not get cynical. Being cynical and sort of world weary, as some translators are, is, in my opinion, very unattractive. Worse than that, it's energy sapping. And your potential clients can feel that. You come across as a negative force if you're kind of know-it-all or cynical or whatever, that sort of stuff. I think you should make a point of spending time with people who are passionate about what they do, because it's that passion actually which will attract good clients to you and keep you moving ahead and enjoying what I really think is one of the best jobs out there. I translate every day, and I enjoy it really every day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So much. Really priceless.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.